Hey.
Okay, so it's 6:30. I'd like to call to order the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District Board meeting, May board meeting. Let's just to start, do you mind if we just go ahead and introduce who's in the room for those who might not be able to see on camera? So I guess I'll start with the ISO presidents.
Pam Skinner, manager.
Mark Gurnis, manager. Benjamin Karp, board member.
Eric Cordy, Water Quality Monitoring Coordinator.
Paige Alberg, Watershed Project Manager.
Erin Anderson-Wens for Engineering Company.
Awesome, thank you so much. I don't see any guests on the phone, so we don't have to worry about that. So Paige is going to be helping us today. I know Tina is out. We'll start. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Just a reminder, if you want to pull anything off the consent agenda.
Oh, we do that first, right? I figured that we do that
I
next.
think it's in.
Oh,
or you
that's
approve,
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I think Val was right. So you can approve the agenda first and then move to the consent agenda and pull anything
Okay.
at that time.
So let's give that a shot. Does anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? I have one thing I do want to pull quick. Okay, I'd like to pull the minutes out and we can put just briefly, and we can put them, where should we put it? I guess we can pull it out and discuss it right after right before the visitor comments.
Yeah.
Anything else? I think it's the only one I had to pull out. Okay. So can we move to approve the consent agenda excluding the minutes?
I will move to approve the consent agenda while pulling the minutes.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Did we approve the agenda too?
Yes.
Did I interrupt that? Okay.
No, you can.
We didn't vote.
Oh, we didn't vote.
I think I interrupted you. Okay.
Can we just restart it?
Right. Really.
So.
They've both been moved and seconded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lauren, just to make sure that I don't do something wrong, can we go back and do the all in favor for the agenda?
Yes, I don't know that was officially. I messed you up too. So maybe the best thing is a new motion approving the agenda and the consent agenda with the exclusion of the minutes, and just do the whole vote.
I love that. You're always not messed.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving to I guess it would be the minutes. The only thing on the minutes was around the approval of the additional spend for the where is it?
Deep Battle Creek.
The additional funding for the school. I just wanted to make sure, and when I read it through, she covered the pros well. I think it wasn't really clear on the negatives, so I just was hoping that we could have it bulleted out. I think that would help. If it's covered when I went back and read through it, I think I could get to the points that she pulled out, but we use very specific language on just the pros and the cons, and I want to make sure it's captured.
Okay.
That's really
Yes, and it was, I believe it was a conditional.
It was a conditional approval.
Yes.
The rest of it was. Okay. And I think now we have to make a motion to approve with the edits. Is that correct, Lauren?
Well, with the changes, I wonder if we maybe just don't vote on it tonight and then have them revised and revisited at next month's meeting, because I'm guessing you'll want to see the added language before you approve it.
That definitely would be accurate. I just want to make sure that
Okay.
it's nice and clear there.
I'd suggest that the ruling is tabled for tonight and that revised minutes are in next month's packet for you to review.
Does that need a motion?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, perfect. Let's table the minutes for next
Okay.
month's meeting. Because I had taken a note to also bring up conditional approval and just follow up how that went. Okay. We don't have any visitors on,
No.
and so now we move to the permit program.
I don't understand.
Yeah, so no applications, just the enforcement action report. Mary, I don't know if you have anything to add?
Nope, yeah, just some site updates on the enforcement report, and then, yeah, there was no permit submittals for this board meeting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say welcome to Nicole Peterson. She's new, right? I think that was a nice call out. Do you mind helping me understand the Sweet Street violations? Was that with some of the work that's being done with Woodbury?
No, street sweeping violations usually go hand in hand with lacking a good anti-tracking BMP at their construction entrance, so just excessive sediment tracking on the roadway.
Thank you very much. That helps.
Mhm.
I had a question about the North St. Paul improvement actions. And just to clarify, has the contractor that is on that project worked with the district in the past? Could they have been more familiar with dewatering actions and how to best handle that? Because it seemed like that was a problem.
Yeah, so it's oftentimes that I'm working with contractors that I'm familiar with, that we've worked with in the past. But sometimes it's their foremen or their laborers that just start up the pump and don't know really what you can and can't do. So in this instance, I'd worked with the superintendent quite a bit, but it was one of his laborers that had started doing it without really knowing what the rules are. So we just had like a opportunity for education there, and to ensure it doesn't happen going forward on this project and on any other projects that they're on.
Thank you, Mary. Kind of going just one step further, did the SWIP discuss anything about actions regarding dewatering? Did they have it right there?
There is definitely some generic language about dewatering in the SWIP, so it's something that every contractor should be aware of. I will say, yes, they don't all always read that. But yeah, definitely what should be information that they're aware of. And then there should always be like a certified SWIP trained individual on site. In this instance, the person pumping was not the trained individual.
Okay, just wanted to cover that base. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. There's nothing to approve in the permit program. Let's move to the student.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay. Just gonna jump in. I have some questions on the Battle Creek Park improvements. I'm unfortunately familiar with this site and the failure of some of the erosion control. At what point does that ever escalate to a fine? I know this has been going on since last fall where perimeter control wasn't always in place. And this spring, we had multiple events and the contractor failed for a few weeks to really do anything about it. So I guess that's just my question, is at what point does that contractor get a fine for not complying with permits?
Yeah, so there's kind of two sections in our permit program. Public projects, we don't retain any escrow, so there's no monetary fines for public projects. We do $155 deduction in escrow for every non-compliance report for private projects. So for in this case, the public project, there haven't been any monetary fines. Last year, there was a close instance of doing a stop work order where I would shut down the site until erosion sediment control items are in compliance. So we do have that leverage when it comes to public projects. And typically that's kind of a last resort thing, but if I'm not getting compliance from a contractor, it can resort in that.
I guess in this case, I mean, a stop work order would just be stop work on erosion control and restoration because all their site work has been completed. So I guess it'd be nice to see that there's some measure in place to keep them on it.
And if it gets to the point where it's an issue, I can always get other entities involved, like the MPCA, where they do have that discretion for monetary fines. But that would be escalating it quite a bit. So I prefer to go to the route of working with the contractor if I can, but if there's really a pushback or if they're not fixing anything, then we can take those steps as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Awesome, so let's move forward to the stewardship grant program. Now there's stuff in the consent agenda.
Yes, yeah, 2 projects approved in the consent agenda. I did, so just maybe 2 or 3 days ago, got the final plans for that Battle Creek Middle School project and their pollutant removal, and they are their phosphorus removal is exceeding what the original plans were. Yes, so we feel comfortable approving that, so I can bring more details next month. They're still going through some things on their end, so I think we're at final plans, but as far as we're concerned, the stuff, all that stuff should be finalized, but so that's reflected in here in the budget status update.
I have one very quick question.
Yeah,
On the stewardship grant program. I was just looking for it as I follow along here.
Yeah.
There's a table that is provided that lists kind of the number of projects that
Yeah.
were.
yep, the budget status.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious, there were, I believe, 67 maintenance sites.
Yes.
And how many projects
Yes,
does that
so
represent?
that represents 67 individual applicants. So the maintenance grant is good for 5 years. So this is everybody's, so we started it in 2018. So now the 2018 people are done. So everybody who's applied since 2019 up until present day is included in there. So most of those, I think almost all of them are residential properties who've applied for that grant. So they're eligible for the 50% coverage. So it's 1,500 max. I don't know, that's, I gotta change that, 7,500, but 7,500 for that max for 5 years, yes. So they're eligible for 1,500 max per year.
So they are in essence existing, they're none of the new ones, I guess.
Correct, yep, so they all have to go through our stewardship grant program, or we have had some permit projects that have wanted to do something extra, so we've let them go through the maintenance grants. But they have to be closed out stewardship grant projects, everything complete and finalized, and then they can apply for the maintenance grants.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Don't have any questions. Anyone else have questions on the stewardship grant program? Okay, so let's start on our action items. First one is the Lake Owasso Shoreline Restoration Phase 2 project bid award.
Yes, so this you saw last month, approved it to go out to bid. We were excited with the 4 bids that we received. Sandstrom Land Management, you can see, was the low bid. We worked with Sandstrom, they're one of our maintenance contractors for this year and have been for a couple of years. They do a lot of rain garden and shoreline installation and maintenance. So we're recommending approval of this contract to Sandstrom Land Management.
That was my question, was they are low bidder, but just to verify that in fact they are a known commodity.
Yes.
We have experience with them and the quality of their work and all of the past experience we have, no issues.
Yes, yep, it's all been good. They're, based out of Roseville, which is nice, so they're nice and close. Yep, but yeah, I would say we've always had positive experiences with them.
I was gonna ask with the, let me ask one, so we bid the project at 125,000. I'm used to seeing a distribution around 125,000, and these were all kind of lower, which is great. But I'm curious, when we look at those deltas, do they share that information with us for one? You know,
As far as,
like, for
so,
example, do we know if these are material costs or just, people, work hours? Out of curiosity?
yeah, so we have, the detailed material bid form, yes, so we have everything laid out. Yep, so we can see exactly where those differences come. Some of it too was with that, there's 2 years of maintenance included, so there's a few differences in those maintenance costs.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, we were excited to see it under the engineer's opinion of cost there. Yeah.
And what do you recall the last program we worked with Sandstrom Land Management?
Yes, so they were part of our last year maintenance contract. So we worked closely
For
with
the
them
PIP?
for our BMP maintenance. Yes, and then they're approved again this year, and then they've done many stewardship grant project installations. So we've worked with them closely on those.
I don't have any further questions. Do I have a motion?
I would motion, take back.
Yeah, it's at the bottom, it's at the bottom of that page. Or no, you take back. the motion.
Is this, would this motion be on,
It would be a motion to accept the bids and award Lake Owasso Shoreline Restoration Phase 2 project to Sandstrom.
and not, okay. I would make a motion that we accept the bids and the 4 bids that were received and the selection of Sandstrom Land Management.
I would second that.
Discussion? So we'll do all in favor, say aye.
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 So if you, on the bottom of each one of those action items, they give us the suggested language, so it makes it easy, we can just read what it says.
Yeah, so I guess my hesitancy was if we were gonna go. Is if we were gonna go through, because there are other action items, and I had questions on a couple of the others.
Oh, yeah.
So whether or not the motion should be inclusive of all action items or
Oh.
individually.
We do them one at a time.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, but you're
Thanks.
good, yeah. So this is for the next action item for. Ready for that.
Yep, this is the bids that were collected for the Arbogas
Oh, yeah.
filters.
Yes.
Had a lot of interest in this one, which we like to see. Yeah, we collected, what is this, 9 bids. And if you remember last month, in the board packet, there was a memo describing what the project is and that the engineer's opinion of cost at that point in time was $723,000. So you can see that all of the bids came in higher than that, but not, some of them not so significantly higher. So we like to see this, a good distribution. Now, some of them at the bottom get pretty big. That had to do primarily with different, I mean, it can be hard to say, it can be hard to tell. I was actually going to mention this with your questions on the last one. You know, a lot of these things are bid in terms of unit price per quantity, and you don't know how they're factoring in time versus materials. And sometimes the unit prices can seem really different, one bidder to another, based on who knows somewhere we can throw some soil versus who knows somewhere that are, you know, which companies own their own machinery, for example. So but one of the biggest differences across these contractors was the cost assumption for the vault itself and how that might be constructed in terms of shoring, and then also in terms of the lids that go on top of this filter. But we're happy to see some familiar contractors here. Shoreline Landscaping, actually, this is the lowest responsible bidder here. They were involved in the Mounts Park Academy and St. Pascal's project last year, had a good experience with that contractor with those projects. And the sub that they're going to be using for the construction of the cast in place vault is actually the same sub that was used for the Frost Canard underground filter, which was done several years ago and was successful. So we were happy to see a familiar entity there that we've had some experience with. So any questions?
Lauren, can you see those? Sorry, Val, I just want to make sure. Yes, I forgot to share that earlier. Okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
The Mounts Park Academy, was that the one with the nice seating area on the outside?
Yes, and they've been using that a lot this year.
That's good.
Oh, any questions before I ask if we have a motion? Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the bids and award the 2023 target retrofit project to Shoreline Landscaping Contracting and direct staff to prepare and mail the notice of award, prepare the agreements, and review the required submittals?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Awesome. Discussion, any further discussion? Nice.
Great. All right, we'll get that going. Awesome.
I just out of curiosity, would it be a lot of work to help us highlight what the last program was? The Mount Park Academy really kind of put a picture in my head very quickly. It'd be nice to see the last time we worked with them. That might be helpful.
Sure, you mean, photos?
Or no, just the name, frankly, like the name for the first one was really helpful.
Oh, yeah.
Like for.
Yeah, so as far as working with Shoreline?
Yeah, so when we talked about Sandstrom land management.
Oh,
you said
sure.
BMP man.
Oh, I
Okay,
see.
now I remember
Yes,
that.
yep, so the only time we've worked closely with Shoreline was last year with Mounds Park and then St. Pascal's Church. We've seen them on a few stewardship
very
grant
good job.
projects, yes.
They did. And Bar has experience with them on other projects as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, so that
Yeah,
was,
and it's not at all being upset with this decision.
Sure.
That just painted a picture in my head.
it's helpful, yeah. Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Okay,
Val, do we need a vote on that last unanimous motion?
yes, we do. I was just,
Yeah.
forgive me.
Sorry,
I didn't discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Third action, district holiday schedule change.
Yeah.
Any discussion or questions needed on this?
I have a question. It was highlighted in the packet that I believe federal agencies or federal entities have been observing both June 19th and also Indigenous Peoples' Days. There's also discussion about state actions regarding June 19th or Juneteenth. But nothing specifically within state actions about Indigenous People Day. And I'm just curious if there was any kind of comparison or evaluation of other local governments. Are we kind of leading the pack in terms of taking that holiday? Or are a number of other watershed district cities, whomever, do we
Yeah,
know
so as far specifically for Indigenous people,
specifically?
yes, I know Tina looked at a few and that's, yeah, I would say, yeah, a little bit behind Juneteenth. Some people still are calling, they have it as Columbus Day or Columbus Day / Indigenous People Day. So that's been a holiday for some entities for a while. Tina did mention if the board wants more info on Indigenous People Day, we could, Juneteenth is coming up, so if you can make a decision on that one and then we could bring more information.
Didn't Tim Wall sign something last year about this particular holiday?
No, he-
I thought he did.
I'm certain that he did regarding
I definitely know
Juneteenth.
Juneteenth. Well,
I'm not certain about Indigenous people. I guess I will say, I don't have an objection. I was just wanting to just assure that there had been some benchmark.
I know previous entities have had Columbus Day off, and it's essentially a name change and recognition of that.
Yeah.
And I know the county, that their union traded Indigenous Peoples' Day / Columbus Day for an extra Thanksgiving Day, so it's recognized that way in our unit. So I think there is precedence for having the day off.
He signed it Monday, October 10th, 2022.
Good catch.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the Google said.
Yeah, that's what I was.
I just did the same thing. Yep.
I
I
It's
have
a
no
very good
objection.
question. Yeah, I have no further questions. Do we have a motion to shoot, I lost my language. Do we have a motion to accept the new holidays? Forgive me. A motion to add Juneteenth and Indigenous Peoples' Day, June 19th and October 9th respectively to the district holiday schedule and include them in subsequent.
I will second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Alright. That was the fun one, now on to the audit.
You get to talk to us about the audit.
Great, so what I know is, we had a clean opinion of the auditors, no findings. They had no recommendations for change. The summary is included in there. There's a lot of technical pieces that if you have questions, Tina even said like she would probably have to bring it back to the auditors, so we can definitely do that. There's nothing that you need to approve. You can accept this audit, but this is, what they found but it's all good. So I don't know that there should be any.
Do you remember when the budget discussions come up again? It's in the fall, isn't it?
Yeah, so we
You
start,
it in the summer.
yes, July, August, and then it goes through the fall.
Yeah, there were some trends on the general fund budget stuff that I'm curious about watching.
Yes. Tina did, yep, she thought that might come up, so, yeah, she would like to talk more about that during budget discussions.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me. And another comment. I appreciated the report. There was a section around, not that they found things, but that they had other, let me find it before I. Anyone else have a question while I'm looking? Oh, yeah. This one, they provided additional information for the pension funds, and they went through the set of changes that have been occurring over the years. And I was curious, as we discussed budget, should we be looking at some of the inflation prices again, because they've been bouncing differently? And that was, that timeline of change was really fascinating, especially with where inflation is now. And it's not like you want to jump to current inflation, but is there a point where you revisit the average assumed?
Sure, okay.
But that was supplementary information.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something that would be almost considered more in terms of the budget and not actually under the audit itself?
Exactly, yeah, so this was more of a comment for when we do start discussions on the budget, is that something that we have to talk about, for sure.
Okay.
I know that when I was reading the final compliance report, there's some language here that says, and I'll just read it out. Accordingly, we have performed additional procedures. Other matters may have come to our attention regarding Ramsey-Washington Metro District's non-compliance with the above referenced provisions insofar as they relate to accounting matters. I was curious, did they communicate that to us informally, or do they? I'd assume not. It looks like very common language.
Yeah, I think it's standard language.
Okay.
I'll have Tina follow up if it's not, but yeah, I think that part is standard.
So they're just clarifying questions.
Mhm.
Any other questions, or do we have a motion to accept the 2022 audit results?
I would motion to accept the 2022 annual audit report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, attorney report. Lauren.
Hello. I don't have anything to report to you tonight. Paige and I have been working a little bit back and forth on a contract, but other than that, things have been kind of quiet with us, which is a good thing for the district.
Thank you. That's good.
Mhm.
Okay, number 9 is board discussions and topics. This was, as some of the old team, the old board members were leaving, they had suggested, hey, we have this adopt a drain program. I know the CAC covered it in their report and they discussed it at their meeting. Is there any desire to look at adopting culverts around the area? There's been some residents who said, hey, I found this culvert, and there's these things in it, I'd like to clean it out. And so as we think about engaging the community, does it make sense to consider solutions like adopting a culvert?
Can I chime in here?
Yeah.
Okay, or Dave has his hand raised too, but Dave, let me, I don't know.
And this is just for consideration. There's no motion for it. It was just something that was brought up, and out of respect to the board members, I want to make sure that we follow up with it.
Yes, yeah, so from our, Dave chime in here too, where I miss anything, but so from a staff point of view, you know, adopt a drain. Usually those are within city right of ways, public right of ways, a little easier access, safer for people to access. Adopted culverts are, you know, we don't always know who owns those properties. They're not in the safest spots. It's not something we as staff feel we should be having residents go out and clean. There's a lot, they're usually oversized, so there's a lot of capacity to them. So even if they're semi-blocked or there's, you know, a little bit of sediment or buildup in there, there's still capacity for water to flow through. We, you know, Dave and our water quality team check critical infrastructure and keep those going. So our trash racks and everything get checked very regularly to keep things flowing. And then we do have our report a problem on the website that anyone can tell us, hey, this needs to be checked out. And either we could check it out or send it to the appropriate authority.
Do we know how often that report of problems been used specifically on culverts?
On culverts, very minimal. We probably get one report of problem a month, and that's being generous. And I don't know how many for sure, maybe a couple in the last few years on a culvert.
And can I direct a question to Dave?
Mm-hmm.
Dave, when you go and do your inspections, how frequently do you find yourself cleaning culverts if you opportunistically can?
Anytime I see one that's clogged, super rare that it actually happens. And I was just raising my hands just because if there was one that is clogged, generally the water is going to be a little bit higher. I think there could be a risk of just an adverse of them falling into water with flowing water that's stuck in there. There's grates involved with it. There's going underneath roads with just some negative safety stuff alone kind of cringes when I see something like that. Report a problem, give us a call, we'll go out there and do it. But the fact that somebody would want to go out there, what we'll call trash rack rakes, little garden hose, if you will, to go out and clean the structures, more often than not, pretty minor. But if I can take you out on one after some pretty big rain events, and you'll see like, yeah, you don't want just anybody cleaning these things potentially. They're in the public, they're out there, but there's risk involved.
Do we know how often cities get called about culverts out of curiosity?
I don't for sure. They get more calls than we do, but you know, they have, you know, county level, but you know, they have their public works crews going out and cleaning those. You know, we'll oftentimes, if we get a call about something that's on city or county property, we hand that over to them to investigate.
Okay. And I think that's.
If you're curious, I have some pictures of culverts when they're really full and kind of ripping, if you want to take a quick look.
Yeah, I mean, I think the safety aspect is pretty clear, especially considering some of the flows that we're seeing this summer. I do like the desire for. I've seen that picture before. I do like the idea of residents proactively calling it in. It's unfortunate that we don't hear it enough. It does seem like in conversations you do hear, and so as a board member, should we submit if we hear something out of curiosity?
Yeah, you can definitely let us know.
I know for my
So
current. Go Go ahead, Dave, sorry.
I was going to say out of context too, so district-wide is what, roughly about 100 square miles. To my recollection, we own roughly, out of all the culverts in the district, like 150, give or take 10. So as the scheme of culverts and like trash racks is what we call it, there's a lot of them that aren't, doesn't mean we can't help them out and get involved with there, but we open like something like that. We own 150 out of 100 square miles.
Yeah, just the ownership alone, a lot of times is unclear, should do it where they are, and the first thing I thought when I saw this was safety.
Yeah.
Usually when you see one clogged, it is a big storm event. And yeah, I wouldn't be comfortable sending just anyone in there.
Yeah, I think I do agree. I prefer to keep with our current processes that we have in place for reporting problem. I like the creativity in it, and I understand that we're trying to drive some accountability for residents, but in this case, it seems safety risks and the benefit, the benefit doesn't cover the risk.
But maybe it does speak to a point of a different way to address it is as an educational item to get out to the community that we have this website and you can report, like, you can see a culvert clog, report to this, link.
Yeah, I was curious. Because Waterfest is coming up June 3rd. Is this something that's nice? Like, hey, if you see something, say something. I was gonna bring up a conversation for the end of the meeting. Around once again the flooding, and I know Aaron, you have a lot of experience there, but like if they see a problem, they should be reporting it. And I'm just not sure how many people know about it.
Yeah, and I would say if like specifically for flooding, people always know how to get a hold of their city. So, and the city will call us if it's something they want us to look into. Yeah.
Or we all.
In terms of clarification, was the intent that this be specifically more about culverts, adopt a culvert versus I'm just used to adopt a drain.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
Adopt a drain, it's more typically the intakes, there's maybe not as much the safety hazard per se. I don't know, I guess as a past member of the CAC, I'm not going to speak for them, but there are a number of ideas that the group has been working on that it might be good to kind of have a little bit of exchange with them. What are some things they would really like to see worked on that the board might, endorse? I don't know that this is the best place. I personally have at least one suggestion of something that to be more interactive with the community and potentially with the CAC that we might potentially suggest. It's a different direction than this.
Maybe that's something we can add to the board. I don't know if we add it to the board action log or maybe future board topics, because in the CAC reporting, they did list a bunch of things that were of interest, and some of them sound really good.
There are some great ideas.
Yeah, and so it'd be nice to come back and talk about the CAC suggestions in the future for engagement reasons. I like that idea.
Yep, we can do that. Yeah, even, we have it on here at the end too.
Yeah, we can.
I'll talk about that. The very last thing.
It is. Well, I definitely highlighted it, so just talk about it.
Yeah.
I like how proactive you are, Mark. It's like you read my mind. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and, so we're going to pass on adopt a culvert, but we are open to other engagement mechanisms for clearing debris. I do believe in conversation, this was around, I'm going to mispronounce the name, so please correct me, but it's just the tubes that sometimes get soccer balls stuck in it and stuff like that, which I believe is a culvert. So yeah, and I remember walking around and picking those out every now and then when the water's low, but that's pretty much the maximum lifetime. So, but yeah, we'll put that to bed. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Why don't we move on to new reports and presentations? So just really quick, we put it to bed, but we'll revisit the CAC suggestions later and then maybe decide what to add on. New reports and presentations, 2022 district water monitoring report by Eric. Eric, this report was very nice. Read it a couple of times, actually. I really enjoyed it. I have a ton of questions, so
So I'm too, they're pretty chill.
there was a lot. Was there a prepared presentation or do we?
Sure. So yeah, this is a summary of last year's water quality monitoring. Kind of highlights mixed with annual report and kind of, yeah, the highlights of the last year. Outline, I'll be going through the lakes in the district, creeks, different BMPs, a couple of new monitoring studies we're doing this year, and then a couple of partnerships. We'll start with lake water quality monitoring. Our overall objective is to assess the condition of our lakes over time. So with lake and pond sampling, we sample at the deepest point. We sample every 2 to 3 weeks. We monitor early ice out, chlorides mostly, and then the growing season, June through September. Take sound readings at 1 meter intervals throughout the water column, and then take water samples. Yeah, just the top 2 meters and the bottom, looking at nutrients.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah. Let's do that. Yes, please.
Didn't mean to stop here. You just had it up there. One of my questions was the frequency where we do kind of at depth, I call it at depth. And you just had, you typically would sample 2 meters and then at the bottom. So is that the typical?
Yeah.
Essentially all lakes and as well as potentially ponds?
Yeah, really the top 2 meters is really where a lot of the action happens in a lake in terms of water quality, what people see and your enjoyment of the lake is in that top 2 meters. So that's the biggest, that's where when I report on phosphorus, chlorophyll A, secudus, it's all of those top 2 meters.
So if there's a lake that is in the center, you know, a couple of our lakes that are shallow, may not be much more than 12 feet deep.
Yeah.
And when you do the meters versus feet, you're kind of almost at the bottom or nearer to the bottom at the maximum depth. So I was more interested in kind of the bottom sampling versus the top and the frequency of including the bottom.
Yeah, we do a bottom sample whenever it seems logical, when it is that top 2 meters you're getting a portion of. Like Battle Creek is one where it is about 12 to 14 feet deep. We do a top 2 meters and a bottom sample.
Thank you.
If it was just 2 meters, we can leave it at that.
And in your report, there's a couple other indications talking about measurements like the mercury. Is that taken by us or is that taken by a different group?
That's the PCA, I think.
That's
We
the
have
PCA.
yeah.
Okay.
We've done some medals here and there for certain things. Typically Bar will kind of curious how metals move through different BMPs, but it's not typical. I mean, usually we're looking at phosphorus and chlorides and TSS and those nutrients.
And Bar also does PFAs too, is that correct?
Well, the PFAS stuff that's in this report was taken by the Department of Health and the Pollution Control Agency.
Yeah, because they're still exploring it based
Still
off of the-
exploring it, yeah,
Okay.
yep.
There's a couple of measurements in there. I just wanted to make sure that we had clear designation in my head, which one's measured by whom. That helps.
When you take a top and a bottom sample, do you see a large difference, or is it just because that's what people can see up here? Is there a reason that you're not always doing bottom sampling? Just from a water quality, like looking at all the
Chlorides is kind of a big one for the bottom samples because they're heavy, they tend to fall there. So that's a big reason why we do bottom samples, but also to see how much phosphorus is down there. It goes anoxic. There can be a lot of phosphorus down there. When the lake turns over, it kicks all that up in the spring and the fall. So
Yeah, I would think you would see some seasonal differences.
yeah, for sure.
And I assume because we're following what is it, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's guidance for those measures, tops and bottoms, is that correct?
Yeah. So to look at these lakes to kind of simplify it a little bit, we use the trophic state index. This is where chlorophyll is the main component. It's a measure of algal production in the lake on a simple scale of 0 to 100. And yeah, it's a simplified, normalized way of looking at the data. Here's a look at the different trophic states. So the lower the number, the lower the nutrients, lower algal growth, and increased water clarity. As the numbers go up, it's higher nutrients, increased algal growth, and decreased water clarity. Most of the lakes in the district are in that kind of 45 to 65 range. So right in the middle. Here's a little snapshot of 2022 lakes. On the lower end, we have Snail, Wabasso, and Bennett, Phelan. On the other end, Wakefield, Keller, and Coleman. But this is just a snapshot. Looking at lakes in 1 year doesn't really tell you a lot. So we have to look at lakes and ponds over time. So we do summer averages, again, that June through September, the growing season, looking at different trends, 10 and 30-year trends, using the Mann-Kendall to tell if the trends are significant. So just to simplify it, I have all the lakes here for 30-year trends. And we're seeing a lot of positive trends over the year and some no trends, but no negative trends, which is nice to see. A lot of the lakes over these 30 years aren't showing any trends because they've always been great water quality. So they can't get too much better, like Snail and Phelan.
Could I ask about this, or are we going to go through graphs one by one, or is this the summary of all the graphs?
This is the summary, because whatever you all want, but in the past I've done graph after graph after graph, and it gets a little.
Totally, I just wanted to make sure that I could ask you.
Yes.
When I know interacting with some of the residents around lakes, that they'll look at the graphic, they'll see a negative line, and they'll say, why is that considered why is that considered just flat all the same? I know that you use statistical methods to figure out the line, whether or not we believe the trend is positive or negative. But I also noticed that there's a lot of noise in the measurements, and I know that they can throw out some statistical significance. How do we help residents understand that, they might see a negative line, but we, based off of the assessment over time, don't believe it's statistically significant?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I can't tell you how many questions I get about it.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to answer that, because it is wrapped up in the statistics and maximum statistics when it comes to explaining particularly. So I don't know what they trade was.
I don't.
Go ahead.
I have some background in this. I think it's a great question. I was going to compliment the use of Mann-Kendall. That is the appropriate test for trends. So I was glad to see that. I didn't remember seeing it as I read through it, but there's a lot of content. And a lot of times when you see the data that, as you presented in the packet, we're on a lake by lake basis, and you see some variability kind of over time. And if there's like 1 or 2 points that they're almost like outliers, can have a huge influence on the eye, what the eye represents. But Mann-Kendall kind of recognizes that, and that's why it's more, I think, comforting, confidence when you apply that statistical test, but you want to see the data, so you really want to see both. So that would be the kind of the best explanation that I think to
I know
for the
when
average
you have it on the website, that's when, beforehand in previous years, I know that's, they look at it, they see the trend line and they jump instantly, the wrong conclusion was drawn. If there was a way at the bottom to say, look, we have a statistical test, it's, you could label the test or do something to that effect. That I think would help provide some folks at ease. I know Tina had provided some feedback to one of the communities around the lake, and everyone looked at the graphic and were like, wait a minute, this line is not the right direction. Not everybody's statistics, right? That's just not their forte. I know, have you considered figuring out, because
Okay, I found-
no, stop.
Okay.
I will. I'm sorry, this is gonna be frustrating, this meeting, I'll turn it off. I know that you could do some moving averages in some ways and help illustrate that as an overlay potentially. To give folks, this is kind of what we're looking at in terms of the trending, but I know when I read through it in some of these graphics, I was like, wait, okay, that one's clearly a positive, but then I look at another one, it's like, okay, wait a minute, that's the same kind of line.
Yeah.
So even I was going back and questioning periodically.
The other thing I'd like to do, I think, especially when we put stuff on our website, is to eliminate any lines if there's not a trend.
Right,
That
And just keep it there if there is a trend, positive or negative, but if there's no trend, just get rid of it,
Yeah.
so then you can't. Because like you're right, if there's any pitch to it whatsoever, it's positive, it's negative, and
Yeah.
statistically, it's not.
yeah, I thought that was a good comment. Because you had made that observation, and for the next round of this, and in fact, for the one that goes up on the website, if this isn't already up, which I don't think that it is, we can do that, we can take the lines off if it's not significant, because I do agree that's a little confusing,
Yeah.
so I thought that was a good comment.
And I do want to add, Bar did a ton of work on the annual report. I was just a small part of it, so they should get all the
Well.
credit. Yeah.
I mean, I think this is fantastic information to make public. I want folks to understand when things are trending okay versus not okay, more important. And that would be helpful. It'd be wonderful just to hear other solutions. I like the idea of no trend line. Being a math geek, I like the trend line, but
Sure.
I totally get that. It's just finding a way to summarize it. This is very nice.
Can I continue?
Oh, yeah,
Or-
right.
No. So that's the 30-year trend line, or trend analysis. Here we go to 10. And here we're not showing a lot of trends, either positive or negative, except for 2. Coleman has seen a dip in past years, so that's showed a negative trend, but then Owasso has showed a positive trend.
Can I chime in on this one
Yeah.
briefly, Eric? So this is notable too, because the PCA just decided to delist Coleman Lake because of its recent improvement in water quality, and what we've been seeing, I mean, over the last 10 years is the water quality is starting to erode, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, which we're pretty sure about, which is that the alum treatment is eroding. It's kind of lived out its lifespan. This is about as far as we expected it to last. But there's some other, I believe it's Coleman where the macrophyte harvesting was pretty intense, right? So there's some herbicide, yeah. So there's that whole piece that's under some investigation by the district too. So we weren't really surprised to see that. It's kind of a bummer, but we were kind of waiting. Every year we were getting a little bit closer to that. So Coleman Lake's definitely back on the radar and under some investigation by district staff. So
yeah, see, to Aaron's point here, we have
there you go. Yeah.
graphs of Coleman Lake for total phosphorus, chlorophyll A,
Yeah.
and Secudus transparency, and there's a huge dip in all those in the last bunch of years. So like Aaron said, we are doing a large study this year on Coleman Lake, and then using Beaver Lake as a control. They're both kind of shallow lakes. And we were out today taking sediment cores, looking at internal loading. We put out DO probes and took a bunch of sound measurements. Bar was out there doing drone footage of Coleman and Bennett or Beaver. So it'll be really interesting to see what it comes up with.
Do we have any planned items as a district for Coleman, do you know,
In terms
in
of,
terms of water quality before this happened? Before, I mean, you guys have noticed this, do we have anything scheduled to plan for this year, calendar year on Coleman?
just the study.
This is the study.
We want to figure out if, because this drop, from my hearing at Coleman was really out of place compared to lakes like it. So that's why this assumption of maybe it was herbicide treatment that kind of went awry, or again, maybe it's the alum treatment. So we really want to figure out what's going on in the lake before we jump at any one of these machines.
Two kind of quick questions. One, when was the alum treatment again?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember the year of that.
10 years, you know.
I
No,
can pull that during the course of the meeting, but yeah, it's been at least.
I think it was 2008.
Yeah. And
Could be.
the second question around that issue of the herbicide treatments across all of the 18 lakes, 17 lakes, is Coleman the lake that has probably had the most herbicide, do we know?
I don't know the answer to that.
I can
It's a good question.
say that, but I would,
That'd be,
But we're,
yes,
you're aware of it.
Yes.
We're aware of it, so that
Yeah.
might be suggestive.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and they had an organized effort to
Mhm.
do that, so.
And just to build on my understanding of Coleman, it's connected to Jarvis, is that a correct statement?
Coleman to Jar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not, I don't believe we saw any trends on Jarvis, but is there a concern there with that connection?
So one big difference between Coleman, I mean, in one sense, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's higher nutrients, it's going downstream through the chain. Coleman and Jarvis are pretty different lakes in that Coleman is shallow and
Yeah.
Jarvis is deep. So Coleman has a tendency to completely mix multiple times throughout the year. And so any sediment release that happens can get mixed up into the surface waters. And so if you get that pulse of internal load, you have trouble in your surface waters. Jarvis is really, really deep. So the lake only turns over twice a year and outside of the growing season. So you don't tend to see internal load. I mean, certainly the bottom waters have higher levels of phosphorus than the surface, but it doesn't mix to come all the way up. So it's got a bit of a protective mechanism in that phosphorus that settles down tends to stay down. So yes, on one hand, if Coleman got significantly worse, you might start to see degradation in Jarvis, but we're not seeing that right now.
Is it? Oh, I was just gonna ask, are these graphics the best way of being able to determine if we're seeing an impact, or are there other mechanisms to do that?
I think it's a
Yeah.
nice visual look.
Mhm.
Mix that with doing the trend analysis too. Again, you don't wanna
I mean,
throw a
you-
line up there.
You said it earlier, Eric, that all three parameters, the phosphorus, the chlorophyll, and the Secchi, you can see on these graphics that they're
Yeah.
dropping. Whereas the trends are, is that kind of composite.
Yeah.
And so there are some of the lakes where you can see, looks like chlorophyll A is going a little wonky, but overall, it's going in the right direction. Whereas here, just
Mhm.
all evidence really suggests.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're right, because certain years come from weird snapping in one parameter that.
Yeah.
And
there's
then
no complex.
another part of the packet outside of, I don't want to jump ahead, but just a good place. There's discussion about the media filter. I think it's a iron sand
Mhm.
above Coleman on Beam.
Mhm.
And I thought there was commentary about that may be needing some attention.
I'll talk about that later.
Okay, fantastic.
That was the 2009 one,
Yeah, okay.
No, anytime. Shall I continue?
yes.
Okay. So now we're getting away from lakes, jumping into creeks. I took a couple of these things from the annual report, but I'll just kind of go over the main points in the annual report. Jarvis Creek,
Sorry, Eric, I have one more question.
Yeah.
On, where do we label about it being impaired for mercury? I was just thinking about this. I've seen people fishing in several of those lakes and people bragging about the fish. I don't know
Yep.
where we publish that.
Oh, no.
Well, so that's a good catch. So I did not include that well, there might be some narrative description
Yeah,
of the lakes. The best place to find that is on like the DNR's website or the Pollution Control Agency's website. That's certainly something we can pull in. The reason, and I will say this report has changed a little bit each year as the district looks at different things. So if that's something that would be helpful to put in the tables, we can definitely do that. The reason we don't, and the reason we don't have things like PCBs are that those
Can you help me with that
contaminants,
acronym? I just,
poly.
it's pollutants, right? Just. I was
Yeah,
pretty
it's-
sure that I'm still.
Shoot.
Like,
Like
oh,
Floral
Phenols,
or
yeah.
something, phenols, that's the P, yeah. Shame on me, I should know that,
Oh,
but,
processor control board, no.
right, yeah, no. But so those contaminants are managed differently by the state than, say, phosphorus and sediment. So phosphorus and sediment, E. coli, those contaminants are looked at through the impaired water, well, they're all looked at through the impaired waters program, but the responsibility for who needs to do something about it is different for mercury and PCBs because they're so prolific, they're everywhere, and mercury in particular can be coming in from the air. So that's not something that Ramsey-Washington has any control over or that City of Maplewood does, for example. So in the past, we haven't put those on these charts. Now we have a lot of emphasis now on chloride, which is a little bit analogous to these other contaminants I just mentioned because their management, again, is different because they're everywhere. So they're managed on a regional sense in terms of how impaired waters get improved. So yes, there are fish advisories and impairments due to mercury. The district tends not to watch them because they're monitored and managed by a different entity, but that said, it's still in the same waters, but.
Could there just be a link to the DNR lake finder page?
Sure.
Because even there, if you're going out to fish, I mean,
That's
you're
right.
very hard pressed to find a lake in this area that's now contaminated with
Yeah.
mercury. But at that page, it'll actually give you the fish consumption guidelines for that lake, which
Yep.
does vary within the region. So something like that might be helpful.
Yeah, I think that makes
on our
sense.
website too.
Yeah,
And I don't remember what we say. I feel like we mentioned that in here somewhere and we mentioned PCBs as well. I don't remember how we say it. But regardless, yeah, I think links would be a good,
Because even that
Okay,
page
and-
can be kind of hard to navigate, so if you just go right
Yep.
to that lake, link
Yep.
it to that,
yeah, they'll tell you exactly how many you can eat.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it does look like it's been a while since they've done an assessment, if I remember the text correctly, it's like 2007 or 8 or 9, I can't remember.
For mercury
For
in particular.
mercury and, yeah,
It varies by lake, which ones they sample, but.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
yeah, that's a good comment.
Yeah, so Jarvis Creek, we've been monitoring it since 2008. It's impaired for fish and macroinvertebrates. With primary stressors being chloride and TSS and secondary being phosphorus. No 10-year trends for phosphorus, TSS, nitrate or chlorides, but in 2022, it didn't meet state standards for phosphorus, TSS, nitrates, chlorides. But some of the recent BMPs in that watershed are North St. Paul Target, North Presbyterian Church, Harmony Learning Center, and Maplewood Ball, rain gardens, tree trenches, pervious acres, cisterns. Mixed in there.
just to call it out, the peaks that we're seeing with chloride. Those are a seasonal, I think these are presented kind of on a year basis, you know, somewhat over time, but that's typically when those peaks are occurring.
Yeah, so I forget exactly how they're written, but it's pretty much if you go over this at certain, there's a acute and a chronic. And the acute is like 860, the chronic is 230, but the 230 is like over like 3 sampling events. Close to
Yeah,
it's-
is, but it's a specified line.
Yeah, I just, I wasn't necessarily asking about the assessment as much to verify that we're typically seeing peaks for chloride in the spring.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of that April ice out
Yeah.
timeframe, just so calling that out.
Yeah, yeah. But you'll see it as lakes, I mean, they're continually flushing theirs into the creeks and it's,
But it was more notable, I thought, in the creeks than in the lakes.
yes. Next is Fish Creek. We've been monitoring this since 1995. We partnered with Met Council with monitoring this for years, although that's ending the end of this year. But Fish Creek's impaired for fish, macroinvertebrates, E. coli, and TSS. And it is showing an increased trend in phosphorus, TSS, and chlorides, and didn't meet state standards last year for phosphorus and TSS. Battle Creek, another one we've worked with Met Council with monitoring. We've been monitoring this since '96. Impaired for chloride, fish and macroinvertebrates. Primary stressor being chloride and TSS, secondary being phosphorus. No statistical trends, but didn't meet state standards for phosphorus, TSS.
You need a pause and introduce.
Yes, I believe it's Stephanie from our CAC.
Oh,
Stephanie, is that right?
Yes,
Okay,
I didn't.
I'll put myself on mute and turn off my video. Apologize.
nope, you're
Oh.
totally fine. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you.
Then BMPs within the watershed of Battle Creek, St. Pascal's, Target Suburban, United Methodist, and Slumberland Outlet. Coleman Creek, we've been monitoring this since 2008. Impaired for fish and macroinvertebrates, with stressors being chloride, TSS, secondary stressor of phosphorus. 10-year trend for decrease in phosphorus, but a 10-year trend for an increase in chloride. And last year it didn't meet state standard for chloride.
And so that surface water. So Eric, the surface water concentration has been decreasing the last 10 years, but the concentration in the lake itself has been increasing, as we were just discussing, which points to internal load involvement. It's just something to note.
I had a follow-up question on that one. So normally when I've worked on other thing, the interface is a good indicator when there might be a pressing problem for some of the system issues that we look at. When do we look at these graphics and say, oh, we need to do something more for that creek? What is our indicator?
Well, I mean, one of the guiding principles for our work is what's listed on the impaired waters list or not. So that's where you see the TP criteria in there at 0.1 milligrams per liter for the creek. So if we're seeing that we have generally been below that, we think, well, good enough. Because there's plenty of other places where it's above. Now here, I think, what's the 10-year average, Eric? 114. So we're pretty close. We have done a lot in the Coleman Creek watershed. You can see in past years, the phosphorus concentration has been much higher. That said, there's a lot of variability year to year. It depends on when it rains and how much, and you all know that. So, you know, I think, especially given that the 10-year trend has been one of decreasing concentrations to the creek. The creek itself, I would say it's kind of a watch and wait. The lake itself, we talked about some of the things that we're looking at.
Yeah.
But typically we're really comparing to the state criteria.
So in like, for example, and I don't mean to jump you back, but Fish Creek is increasing across phosphorus, nitrates. Is that a call to action for us? What should we take from this one which is increasing across the board?
So for Fish Creek, that was recently listed. I think that sediment impairment is a new one, right?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and that's where the state has been looking at all the data collected as well. We look at it, they look at it, and they've decided that Fish Creek, based on the past, I think it's 10 years as well, is impaired for sediment. So that to me is the biggest call to action. Yeah. Now, the fact that phosphorus is increasing doesn't necessarily surprise me because it's probably related to sediment.
Okay.
So does that answer your
It,
question?
it does.
Yeah.
I'm just looking for,
When
when I
if
would-
there's a problem. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when to, because we're exploring the area of Eagle Lake and whatnot for feasibility studies for flood rate, or we're doing a feasibility study in that area, isn't that correct? I just didn't know if this is something that we should be considering on top of that. Just a question.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest things are which ones are impaired. And then we do studies to figure out what's causing that impairment. That's what a TMDL study does. And that kind of sets the framework for what should be done. Yeah.
And we do have this, I don't know if this sort of addresses your question too, Val, but as part of our priority areas for our stewardship grant program, so they're funded at a higher level to try to promote more.
Should we be, because I know looking at the grants in the past, there's some cities that are really taking advantage of them. Should we be heavily doing a public campaign to see if other people are interested in assisting in this particular area? It seems like some of that proactive water, rain gardens, things like that, the partnerships that you've had with Target are really helpful. I don't know, I see increasing across the 10-year trend on multiple fronts, and it is concerning.
I think that's something you could consider for Fish Creek. I mean, Fish Creek until this last year, I think was only impaired for E. coli. So this is a new one. So that's probably why you haven't heard district staff talk a whole lot about this watershed other than E. coli. And E. coli is managed very differently. So this is kind of a newbie. And the fact that I think that non-supportive aquatic life for macroinvertebrates, I think that's also new, although that's very likely related to the sediment.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
I'm done with my question. Thank you.
And then last, we have the Beltline Interceptor, which is not a creek, but a large storm sewer pipe that drains a lot of the district. We've been monitoring this since '95. Again, we started out partnering with my council with this, but they eventually gave it over to us. It's not meeting state standards for TP and TSS, but there has been a dramatic decrease in TSS since its peak in '97. No trends for TP, TSS, or chlorides. And then recent BMPs, the St. Paul Urban Tennis Center.
Quick question that, well, not that it matters, but the creeks, the table has included the length of the creeks and Beltline, we don't list. I'm curious, how far is it? I mean, it's very different from the creeks.
Yeah.
Underground,
Dave, what is it?
Yeah, how many feet, Dave? How many have you walked?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Listed in.
along, what's the comparable length of
Yeah,
Beltline Interceptor? The report highlights length of creeks, but it's silent on the length of the Beltline.
42,000 square feet, or maybe 38, about 42,000, about 7 miles from the end of the Phelan to the Mississippi.
Thank you, 7 miles, double the longest creek we have.
That's 5 in the report.
Let's say 5.
Okay.
Is it in there?
It is.
Just 7.
You have to read pretty carefully. It's in the
Oh,
small print.
I might have scanned over
Does
it.
7 include the Beaver Lake branch, Dave?
So
That's probably what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's all of the pipe with the Beaver Lake branch from the Phelan outlets and everything that we walk.
All right, on to BMPs. This is the alum plant. This is where we add alum to stormwater. Alum binds with phosphorus, creates a flock that settles out in this pond. That flock's held back by the berm. Water continues over the ditch through a series of wetlands or into the lake. We started this in 98, and through the present, we've got an average phosphorus removal rate of 70%. But in last year, it dropped to about 44%, and you'll see in the other right, the last 3 years have been pretty low. And we just had a redo of the whole system in 2019. So I don't know if we're underdosing at these low flows or what's going on, but we'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. But it has had, but
Has the dosing changed?
no, dosing hasn't changed.
Yeah, so the dosing is pretty consistent over time,
Mhm.
but you just mentioned the last couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe there's something happening there with just low
And
flows.
doesn't it only dose when there's a certain flow?
Well, there's almost always flow. So, but there, in the last couple of years, it's actually stopped flowing, so it has. And we've actually shut off the system. Yeah. It should continue, yeah. But yeah, so, but it still has had a big effect on the lake. So that yellow line there is when the Elm system went online. The average phosphorus was 65 before micrograms per liter before the plant went online, and after it stayed at about 29 micrograms per liter and above the deep lake criteria. So it had a big effect.
We've had drought years before, and I didn't see that big of a dip.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of curious, since we redid a little bit of the plant, if there's something that's slightly off. That we have to look into, whether it's the dosing at these low rates or something. It just been.
It's strange with the same dosing and low rates, and it makes me curious what's.
Has it ever been maintained? I mean,
What do you mean?
Well, that was gonna be kind of my question, because when it binds, it sinks to the bottom, and this is kind of a holding pond. Is it ever
Oh,
dredged and
yeah,
removed to
yeah.
landfill?
We go out and measure it every year. And so I think the last year we cleaned it out was 2021. The ultimate goal is when the pond is filled about halfway of capacity to clean it out. So we have done that in the past. It started out way back in the day of they drained the pond down and added fly ash to it, trucked it away, and it was really expensive and really messy. And then slowly got to now where we are reusing pumps that suck the flock down from the middle of the pond. And we actually get in a John boat with a air-cooled motor and whip around it to mix it and pump it out. Usually takes about 10 days, but we get it down to about the bottom afterwards. I don't have any of that information on here of how much water we removed or solids, but yeah, we keep maintaining it and keep an eye on it for sure. Yeah, and so the Beam Avenue enhanced sand filter, construction in 2008. Yeah, upstream of Coleman, 5% iron filings mixed with sand. That iron binds with the phosphorus. Yeah, the last in 2022, basically around 2020, we noticed that the first 15 feet was kind of solidifying and kind of hard. And so we weren't sure what was happening, but last year we had that all dug out and then just put in straight sand. And we're still seeing really good removal rates of 80% last year. And again, the average over the life of it has been about 74% TP removal.
Are you saying that sand without the iron works just fine?
I think there's just so much capacity.
It's
in the
it's
filter.
oversized for
Yeah.
its tributary area, that filter. We built it to fit the size that was available. And this was actually the first iron enhanced sand filter built in the state, as far as I know. And so we put it in as big as we could fit, and it's actually, we're learning is oversized. The other thing is some of the treatment area was going to be developed until it was sized with that in mind, and then it never got developed. So it actually has a fairly smallish tributary area. So there's plenty of capacity in there.
I don't understand though, like, with the iron and without the iron, it works the same.
It's because there's a lot of the filter that doesn't really get leveraged. The water, if it's hitting sand, I mean, it still has plenty of other media to go through. So it's not as if all of the media came out and was replaced with sand, just the first how many feet?
Like 10, 15 feet of something that
Yeah.
is 100 feet long.
Yeah.
It's a small fraction of what it just kind of in the
Yeah.
Brad Inlet.
Yeah, okay,
Where I
yeah.
think it finds and stuff that you
Yeah.
blocked it up.
Have we ever done how do I describe this? A kind of a longitudinal sampling? So that we can kind of see, okay, we're at this
Yep.
point.
Yep.
It looks like it's saturated
Yep.
there. And has that been informative?
So great question. We did used to do that many years ago. I think we
Mhm.
stopped because we're like, there's so much capacity in here. But at some point in time, we should do that again. We were looking at the phosphorus content at different, like in a grid across the filter to see how things were filling up. Exactly. So that we know when we might have to replace it. And what we're learning is that this one has a lot of time before it'll be spent. So, but yes, good question. We've done it before. There's a protocol to do it. At some point, we're like, boy, if we keep doing this, like every couple of years, we're gonna take out all the media. Like we better pace ourselves on this. So I don't know when the last time was that we did that. Eric.
I don't
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Thank Dave, you had your hand up.
I did briefly. We did take some cores of the sand filter a handful of years ago, and they found like that first front was memory serves like an iron carbonate. And when the iron actually had like, I'm getting much out of my realm here, so forgive me. But when the sampler, when there was no more iron left to go, it would turn into the iron carbonate and would filter, so it would turn rock hard. That 10, 15 feet in front of the sand filter turned that rock hard and was kind of pooling water and holding water. So we were still getting good removal rates. So instead of removing that front, 15 feet or so, like, well, let's just replace it with sand instead of replacing the whole media, the sand filter. And then we don't have pooling water, which has mosquitoes and other stuff that's just sitting in there.
Could you help remind me on, we look at maintenance for these BMPs, right? What did we think the replacement timeline for this sand was?
I think it was 30 years.
I mean,
The bench tests.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is based off of bench test data from SACL, St. Anthony Falls Lab, and they were running water through columns over and over and over and over and over. I don't think that's necessarily, well, I don't know. This one's relatively large. So if you compare this to some of the smaller ones, like say at the Woodland Garden at Maplewood Mall, that has a much bigger tributary area. So that gets loaded a ton more. So that's going to be spent well before this one. So it kind of depends. But honestly, at the time these were going in, I think a lot of the filters that are around the state haven't been replaced. Now, sometimes that's because they're not being monitored and people don't know. In the case of the watershed district, the filters that have been monitored, Woodland, this one, they've held up so far. So we've gotten at least, this was constructed in 2008, and that was a big filter. The Woodland Garden was constructed in 2010,
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah.
2010, that was one of the earlier phases. And that one's still holding up too, but at some point they'll need replacement.
As we look at this solution for other, like for rain gardens, and things like that, is there, given the clear signal of performance, is there a drive to use this more frequently? And like we're going to talk about the target retrofit, not that we need to change those plans, but I was curious, is there, with as much hardened, or what is it called, non-permeable
Impervious surface.
impervious surface, would this help that area more? That's the kind of the question, especially with just looking at the performance, it seems really
Yeah.
nice.
I have some thoughts.
Go for it.
Okay, so it depends on the site, and it depends Well, it depends on the goal of the project, it depends on the site, it depends on the tributary area. It depends on how shaded the BMP is. So we've learned some things over the years. And just so happens that this project and the Woodland project, which were really early applications of this media in the state, just so happened that those were pretty good sites. They're really hot. There's not a lot of shading. The tributary area is impervious, so it's flashy, and the filter really gets to dry out between events, which is great. That's what you want. The community of practitioners didn't necessarily know that until more and more get implemented, and then things failed. Fortunately, for Ramsey-Washington, they went in some places that ended up being pretty ideal. So if you have a site, like a parking lot, like a commercial parking lot site is great for an iron enhanced sand filter. But if you can infiltrate, you don't need it.
Which is what the target is trying to do.
Yeah, so, and sometimes, I will say though, sometimes there are projects where it could be a good site for iron enhanced sand, but we're not sure that the property owner is going to maintain it or watch it. So sometimes we'll default to sand in that instance, because remember, like the runoff coming off an impervious surface is largely particulate and not so much soluble or dissolved, because that's what really happens when it's coming through wetlands or ponds or things like that.
I mean, even in some of those situations with the TSS, it seems like the sands do a pretty good job.
Sand does a pretty good job. Yeah, I mean, sand will take out a lot of your particulates.
It just seems, I was really impressed with the graphics, I
Yeah.
guess, on the sand performance compared to some of the other ones we're going to talk to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So it depends. The other thing we've noticed with this filtration media, you really want to give it a chance to dry out.
Yeah.
If you're loading it constantly, and this is why for the Arbogast filter, we decided to go with CC17, because we weren't convinced we would get breaks in the runoff in a really wet year. So we've learned some things as we've gone.
Okay. That helps. It's just
Yeah.
very promising results.
In the right site, it's very compelling. Yeah.
The next BMP on the list is Frost Kennard Spent Line Chamber. We installed this in 2018. We didn't start monitoring until 2019, but so far we're seeing an average TP reduction of 53% and TSS about 80%. The next, another spent line filter is the Willow Pond Spent Line CMAC. CMAC stands for Continuous Monitoring and Adaptive Control. So this is a different from other ones where they take stormwater. This, we're actually taking water off a pond that ultimately drains to beds. And we've only run this twice. And so the idea would be that we come up with a perfect schedule. Like Aaron said, these especially spent line has to dry out before or between treatments. So the idea was we'll figure out a way of like, this can take a day's worth of water or however much volume of water. We'll let it dry out for a day or a week, or that's what we'll eventually find out. But we've only been able to run this twice so far. So that's 1 day of running it out of the 4 years it's been in. So really we're hoping to one of these, or this year and previous years, really dial in this system and figure out how it works best, how it operates best. Because so far we've only seen a reduction of 20% in 2019. Again, this was just running for 2 hours.
Right.
And so that was basically, I think we're still at a point where we need to flush the system where it just haven't run up long enough. And last year we did it and I saw 10%. But again, this is the idea. So we'll be able to control this remotely and really figure out the perfect way to use this system as we experiment over time.
I had a question on some of these controls, and specifically, is this suited just for lakes, or is it also suited for maybe flow and creeks and other solutions? Out of curiosity.
You could use the kind of inlet timing on whatever you wanted. So it keeps track of, Eric, help me with this. It keeps track of the pond level, and it keeps track of the level in the filter.
We don't actually have one in the pond, but we
Okay.
have it in the
In the filter. because we didn't want it to run all the time, because like iron enhanced sand, spent lime shouldn't get water all the time.
Mhm.
So that's right, it senses when it's full, it leaves it open for however long we want it to be, and then it'll close so that it drains down. And we just haven't had enough opportunities to tinker with it, because we had some what am I saying, instrumentation issues when it first got implemented, and some issues with the inlet area. That got fixed, and then COVID happened, and then we got a drought. So this one hasn't had a fair shake
No.
just yet.
Would you still call it experimental? We're learning on this
Yeah.
type of.
Oh, yeah. There aren't as many of these filters out in the world. This was implemented at a time when spent lime was becoming popular because it's a byproduct of drinking water treatment, so it was compelling to try. It can function really well, and has in the Frost Canard has done very well, and also the experimental cell that got switched over. So it holds some promise. This is just a kind of a unique application that we haven't gotten to play with a whole lot yet.
Yeah, as we consider things like, not to go back to it, but the Fish Creek and it's
Mhm.
rising, if that continues to trend, maybe there's a solution here. I
Yep.
just was curious.
Yeah.
What all type of instrumentation do you have installed in there? Are you measuring humidity in the chamber, moisture levels in the, like, for the air versus the actual media?
In the media, I think really all we're measuring is the water level in the filter itself. So we're not so much testing the physical characteristics of the media. Though that would be something we definitely want to be observing as water is coming into this more frequently, especially to make sure that it's draining the way that it's expected to. So, but right now I think it's just, well, and then we can monitor the water, obviously the water quality of that water, both upstream and in the filter.
Give your finger out, Pam, or you're gonna.
Oh, I was just.
Sorry, Eric.
And then, yeah, this is switching out BMPs to kind of the studies we're doing this year.
Oh, did you already cover Shoreview Common Pond?
I didn't do that.
Oh.
I can talk.
I only had one question on that section, and it was, as we put the, I think we, while it was frozen, we put an iron application on, right?
Yeah.
What was our hypothesis on that? When did we expect to see a response when we did that?
So the biggest thing with this is the U was putting it on, and the U was just going to monitor the pond itself.
Okay.
But Bar, Aaron in particular, was curious about like, well, what water's coming in, what's the water leaving?
Yeah.
And so we were just kind of supplementing their data with our data to really figure out if this is working.
So this was kind of like just an experiment.
Yeah, it was like a partnership with the U.
Yeah.
They had been doing some research that indicated that they thought there was a potential for internal load to be affected by putting iron in ponds. Now, I don't know where that's gone since then.
So they're still gonna monitor this year.
Oh, they are,
I
okay.
got in touch with Culver to make sure that they were, that's what we had met with them 2 years ago to kind of see if they're gonna continue this, because they seem like they're kind of losing interest in
Yeah.
monitoring it. But they're gonna monitor it this year. We'll monitor it to, did they just send a report today?
They did just today. I
Oh,
didn't get a chance to read.
I don't look at it either, but we haven't received a report from their findings yet.
Yeah.
I think in here it kind of says it's kind of inconclusive so far.
Yeah, and this application was even more this is my opinion, even more experimental than some of the other
Yeah,
things.
because we had done a review of some phosphorus management, and I know that they put iron in water straight up, right? And so I was just, it surprised me that they put it up on as it froze, and I just didn't know.
Yeah, and that was because they needed to figure out a way to get it evenly distributed across the pond. So we even had them like put a duck cam out there to see if the ducks were gonna eat it or.
I mean, is it important for us to follow up on it, just out of curiosity?
We will follow up.
You guys
Yeah.
will-
Because part of the agreement was they would give us data or a report or
Mhm.
something about this. And
Yeah,
They
just
just
a
did.
partnered research by them.
Yeah.
That'd be
it's an interesting idea.
yeah.
So yeah, so the two kind of big studies that we're actually getting going this week, kind of the effects of aeration, and that how that affects internal loading. So we're looking at Jarvis Mill Pond and Bennett, both which have aerators on it. So we're installing multiple DO probes. We're looking at water quality in all these and taking a lot of sound measurements throughout the lakes and ponds, and then looking at inlet storms and grad samples. And then Coleman Lake, which we brought up a bunch here, and then Beaver as control. Again, we're looking at aquatic plants, internal loading and external loading, using DO probes, aquatic plant surveys, sediment cores, lake sampling, and inlet storm.
Was Coleman trending toward the negative? Would this bias the results of the aeration study?
So these are separate studies. Coleman isn't part of the aeration.
Oh, I thought you said it was a control for it.
No, Beaver's control for.
Yeah, good question.
My bad.
Yeah,
Couple of quick questions. The DO probes, are those like a grab sample, or are they a data logger?
Every hour.
Every hour.
Data
So, yeah. And
So they last about 7 months.
Is it temperature as well?
I think it's temperature as well.
I would
Yeah.
think so.
I
but-
think
I mean,
it's part of
there's
the
a strong correlation between. a
Yeah,
relationship, so
yeah.
I believe
pretty
that's part of
sure.
the data.
Yeah.
There's thermistors.
Yeah.
And then sediment cores, what specifically is that concentration of phosphorus?
Yeah, internal loading.
Mhm.
Looking at
okay.
It's looking at the fraction, the phosphorus fractionation through the sediment, so figuring out how much phosphorus is in the sediment that could be released.
So speciation as well.
Mm-hmm.
It also tells you kind of over time too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at depths. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, reading about the aeration makes me miss Bill a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but,
And then last, just some of the partnerships we kind of talked about here. The U of M and the Shoreview Commons, treating the pond with iron filings, and Ramsey County is helping us out a lot with these lake studies. They're doing additional monitoring and plant surveys, and then and I didn't get you the name of these people, Aaron, but we're working with USGS. GS, they called me up. They're looking for kind of unique sites to look at. If certain BMPs can get rid of contaminants of emerging concern. And so they're really interested in frost canard and a spent line filter to see if that had any effects. And so basically we don't really have to do much, but just kind of help them out to take grabs from. So but that'd be really cool to see what their findings are. Yeah. That is it.
oh, we're supposed to hold their questions to this. So this is really well written report, greatly appreciated. How do you want us to react? What are our next steps after seeing something here?
Helps me know.
I mean, yeah, I really enjoyed the report. It was impactful, but what do we do now with?
Yeah, I
There's a
think-
couple watchouts. We didn't really cover the chloride. Like, what do we do with the chlorides?
Yeah, I mean, so as far as the report, you could give a motion to support. There's no formal action needed.
Yeah.
For that specific thing, minus the cheering and the. everything.
Record that.
And then, yeah, so I guess this is how we inform our next studies and what we look at. So
Okay.
we'll just keep it on our radar. If there's anything specific you want to see, obviously it can go on the board action log or be brought up anytime.
I mean, what do we do with the chloride being so prevalent through the system? I did some Google searching. I'm not an expert at all for it. It seems pretty difficult to deal with, and I can't tell if it directly impacts the population, frankly. It wasn't very conclusive evidence, in my opinion.
Well, what do you? Well, one of the things that you saw in the report was the monitoring that district staff has been doing and trying to figure out where that should happen. And so I think, now that there's been another round, I think you just got Gabby the data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I should have included that. Over the last 3 years, we've been monitoring potential hotspots for chloride. So we've done over 30 different small ponds or places that have potential throughout the district. So I think we've done probably close to 75 different sites, little places that we weren't looking at before, to find hotspots for chloride and then kind of figure out where we could go.
You did include that data. I was just, because it affects the aquatic life. And I know fishing, right? I was just,
But then you can't get rid of it once it's
Can't
in
get
there.
rid of
It's all about preventing it from getting in the first place. And I think I would be in favor of our district really taking an effort and saying, what can we do? I know it sometimes I bring this up and they're like, well, nothing we can do. They gotta put salt on the road on the freeway. But I mean, maybe there is something we can do. Maybe there's an innovative thing where we can build something on the side of the freeway to collect the salt or.
Well, and the first step in that is figuring out where are the concentrated areas.
Right.
Because no one, the cities aren't going to be doing that kind of monitoring. That's an example of where a watershed district has really great value for its member cities, because you can all look at that watershed scale and say, hey, Maplewood, what's going on with the northeast quadrant of blah, 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 or, not to call it Maplewood, but you can see if there's a trend over time where, boy, it's always hot up there. What's going on? Because then you can do outreach to cities, and then you can find, oftentimes it's maybe most likely commercial properties or private properties that are loading it up. So to reach back up into your watershed and make connections with the property owners and the cities to figure out how better to manage. So we're kind of building evidence over these last few years of monitoring. And that's what those maps are about too. And where we've said, we've covered X number of acres or whatever. We're trying to figure out the best representation of how do we find these hotspots.
it does seem like there's a lot of.
No.
I was gonna say that there seems like a lot of signal in the mapping, like it would be really good for us to at least come together as a board and talk about like how our focus there. Like I would love that as an action. I think very much want to support what Pam suggests.
And this is not to, gosh, Mark always wants to jump in and I'm gonna cut you up, but so Stephanie, who's on the call, she did a great kind of investigation last year through the CAC. I think it was about a year ago. I'm so sorry, Stephanie. But a lot of detail gathered from cities, and that was in hopes that it could guide us, like what, how do we make these next steps? So we do have that available. I do need to look at it and organize it, to help guide us in as far as that. And also I know Sage does a lot of promotion of theirs, like small ice train, smart something. Smart. Yes, you know what I'm saying? So she does a lot of promotion and helping people get involved in those types of trainings.
I just want to echo a lot of what's been said. I felt that this report was wonderfully done. It was easy to read. I might pause a little bit, say it wasn't fun. I mean, maybe it was fun to read, but I am intrigued by having a little better drill down on the work that's being done on the hot spots for chloride. I would certainly advance. That's kind of where you were going. And I would like to kind of make the request even that we bring it back at a future meeting.
Totally agree.
And maybe even giving a platform for Stephanie, just so heads up. I'm wondering, this was one of the ideas that I'd floated earlier when we talked about the CIC doing the culvert kind of adopt. The possibility of having CIC and or endorsing a broader, they might be the vehicle to carry it. Chloride is so, relatively speaking, easy to collect, monitor. And is this an opportunity for kind of citizen science? It could really build our data set and bring the community more broadly into examining this problem, because it's a very real problem.
I second. We don't need a motion for it. It seems like it would be good for board action, just to have a discussion or some reasons.
Yeah,
I
I'll
like the
definitely bring it
idea.
back to Tina and see where it best fits in, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, we've known forever that Battle Creek Lake has been rising and it's right next to the freeway getting dumped, so like, there's things like that. We don't need any more. We know it's a problem. And what kind of innovative things can we come up with to help address it, to slow that? And I know using less salt and more sand in their machinery has been good, but it's still, they're using salt. It's still increasing.
Yeah.
Still sell it in bulk in the hardware stores.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything. Great report. That's awesome.
Great.
Good to hear. I'll let them know.
Next action is the target. Do you mind if we move to the next section? Make sure I'm done with the discussion. Is Woodbury Target Store retrofits? This is what, the third one?
Yes, our
Third one.
third Target store, so
Third
that's
and final. in the
yes,
district.
the last Target in our district.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had this slated for our 2024 targeted retrofit program. Aaron, jump in here, but I can give kind of a high level. Yeah, so for this one was a little bit different. The other two Target stores in North St. Paul and East St. Paul, Target owned that whole property. This one is part of a larger complex. So it was newer properties owns that. So we met with them 2 years ago, kind of to talk through the retrofit process. We looked at, hey, can we do something in the whole kind of that Valley Creek Plaza area? They weren't really interested in that. So we focused on Target. Target was very interested and was supportive of us moving forward with something at the Target store. So that seemed like the best approach. So we put together the two concept plans. One with, both the other Target stores had the filtration basins and tree trenches. So we looked at that for this store, but the tree trenches just didn't make sense. So we are proposing to move forward with the fund design for concept one with the two rain gardens with the iron enhanced sand trenches. And
How many parking spots does that lose?
That's 8.
Oh, and I'm just so happy they're willing to do this, because like that store, their parking lot's full.
So that was, so the other two Targets, I can't remember the count, like about 50 and 30 parking spaces were given up. This one, we've been out there a handful of times, like on a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning, and it's full. So even getting up those 8 spots was a pretty significant deal for them, but yeah, they're excited about it. They've been easy to work with, getting through the design process. Any more details that Aaron can go through on the design, or do you have any questions?
Could you help me remind me of the funding mechanisms for this one? Is
Yeah.
it cost shared? I couldn't remember.
So this one we're proposing it to go through our targeted retrofit program. So that would be 2024, so we have budget for that. And we do have potential stormwater impact fund dollars that we can use towards this too. So we'll look at that as we're finalizing the budget for next year. So that's where that would come out of. And then this would be something the watershed district would maintain for 2 years, and then Target would take over for the remaining.
Cost.
Yep.
And this one needs approval to move forward.
Not necessarily, more of a, how did we word it here? Like if you're in supports, yep.
We like to bring these to the board a couple of times. One is after the concept design is complete and, Target's okay, just to make sure, hey, are we still okay with going forward? And then if that's okay, you would see it again when the design is done. We have a little finer point on the cost. You see the range. People love to see that, but because it's so early.
Minus 500,000.
I know, it's ridiculous, but that's how engineering guidance dictates. So we'll come back before we put it out for bid, just to give you another look at it, make sure that the cost is coming in as expected and that the benefits are appropriate.
EP looks great if we achieve the range, or even high up in that range. I don't have any questions.
How finalized is this design areas of the rain gardens? I mean, I've noticed this may be outlots, so maybe it's not target because there's been outreach for the south rain garden to expand. As well, just south of the north rain garden, you could perhaps add a curb cut that would then drain further to the north.
So that'll,
Low cost.
could be, yeah, and so that'll come in a little bit more as we get more information. Yeah, we'll be looking for those options.
Yeah, I know with that, like some of the outlet areas, they have those proposed for future
Okay.
development. Yeah,
But we'll be taking a finer point look at all that for sure, and including taking soil borings, which haven't been taken yet, and that's where we get at questions of media and whether things will infiltrate or.
Yeah, it looks like an infiltration is planned, but.
You always hope for it. Yeah.
I don't have any further questions on this. So I'm excited to see what the proposal comes from, especially knowing some of the other solutions that you guys come up with.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the curb cut, though. It was brought up in one of the consent agenda items. That seems like a really nice way to make sure you get the right converted flow into that area.
I have just one kind of question. This is the last target, the target that is it's Oakdale, or is it Woodbury? Or by animation, east of Menards. That's not in the district.
no, is that another one? That might be another Woodbury one. There's 2 in Woodbury. Only 1 is in our district.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but Target's been, I know they talked actually to Bar about other Target stores outside of our watershed. They're working with Cap Region on I think it's the Midway Target to do some projects there,
Yeah.
so it's kind of exciting.
Just to answer that one, I think it is in Oakdale and it's in Valley Branch.
Oh, there you go, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sip.
I was wondering why you came on. Like, what did I say?
Yeah. Oh, no, don't worry. I know
But do you
people
know
get scared
what
when I
I
chime in.
There was this voice.
I'm here.
Hey, whatever the lawyer. Awesome. So administrative reports.
So only things that Tina highlighted, definitely I can try to answer questions if you have any. It was Waterfest, Valley that up earlier, coming up June 3rd. And then just to note that our July board meeting was moved to June 28th, just to avoid the 4th of July holiday.
I do know that we've been tracking about the board roles and responsibility piece. I didn't notice that nothing was mentioned on that. It's not on the action log. Did she say anything to update that area?
No, I can ask her about that. She'll definitely listen to this too.
I think we had the board on something to do with salt on our board log, just so don't forget.
Yes.
Yeah, let's make sure that we add this for sure.
Yes. And what was your board roles?
Yeah, it was, we, just to highlight for the new members, we, as a board, we wanted to really clarify how we add value, what we're responsible for, what we're accountable for. Knowing that we have a really good support staff under us. So we're not, we balance out, you know, what we control versus them and just have some clarity there. So that's what she's trying to do. And I know it's been in progress. I just didn't see it, did it? And then on the West of Adness, I know we're coming up to June, and I just was curious how that was going with the boundary change. You know, there's been some pause with the change of the group or some of the group. So it'd be nice to see that. It's coming up in June.
Yes, I know that. Yes, that is.
Oh, she has it here. She named it governance manual. Okay.
Oh.
So
I see. Yes.
I didn't
Yeah.
connect the dot in my head.
Yes.
Okay, so in June, it's gonna be a pretty heavy month.
Yeah.
Be
ready for that.
And do we have the quality, well, does Vlamo, are they gonna pass us the quality stuff? So not that we need to change the report that was provided in 2022, but will we have some history coming over with that lake out of curiosity?
I'm sure whatever they have, they will pass. I don't know what
I don't know if
they,
they monitor it in the same way.
I don't know how they
Might be-
have.
I don't know either, to be honest. I know I looked on their website. a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to find out, but it seems, I believe it's impaired. I believe there's some work that needs to be done for sure. And there's a couple of environmental things that they're running on it, so
Yeah.
just, I think June's gonna be a pretty heavy month to talk through that.
Yes. Yep.
And the adopt a drain. Okay, I'll talk with her.
Mhm.
Hey. Any other questions for Tina? Oh, on the, I got the email for the volunteering for Waterfest. Did everyone else get the email
Oh,
about the volunteer time? Do my best to attend this year.
Yes, yeah, bring kids and whoever else, it's fun.
And there was another thing in June. Oh, the tours.
Is there, I mean, I've typically done something with Waterfest. Is there something that board members are kind of asked for? Is there a better slot? Do we know?
It's a
Or
good question.
can I-
Pam, you used to always do the golf cart, right?
The golf cart is the best job.
You
It
get
is.
to fool around.
Only they had guys on hand coming after the last one.
Oh,
There's
Is there something?
was giving some kids a ride and then I got to do something and the kid got on and took off in it and I had to chase it down. It was a near miss, but it was all fine. And then the next year that wasn't an option for me to do. But if it is an option now, it is the best.
Yes.
You just drive around and help people bring
Yeah.
stuff places.
Yeah, if you want to reach out to Carrie directly, or if you have Maddie's, I can't remember whose email was
I think
in that.
Whatever it's clear.
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Maddie may have sent one of the original.
Yeah.
And I haven't responded yet and I thought, oh, I better do that.
yes, yeah.
It
we
might be
would love
nice
have
to
her.
coordinate and see if we shouldn't coordinate because we hit quorum very easily, wouldn't we?
Oh,
Open meeting laws. I
yeah,
just think it'd be nice to show up in some presence. I know we all work and this is a work day,
Yes.
so.
yeah, I
know it's
think,
difficult.
Lauren, I don't know if you're, I think, yeah, if you're attending Waterfest, that's fine, you probably can't coordinate your duties.
You can all be there at the same time and
Something
chat. You
that's-
just can't conduct any watershed
No
business.
decisions, right? That's the key.
Right.
Leading volunteer and.
Right. You can enjoy each other's company and volunteer and all that. Yeah.
Right.
Another good job is being in charge of the fire pit. Speaking of going. I think
Thing probably.
Being a parking sentry was not so.
Yeah, that's the boring one.
Yeah,
Center is-
I think they hire that out now, so, yes.
And I had one other, I know it's maybe not the right time, but we had talked about carp fishing competitions. Is that
Yes,
something, I know we've discussed it.
yeah, they did it at Owasso last year, are you talking about Waterfest, or, yeah, so they.
There was one, I couldn't remember when we put
Yeah.
that into the schedule.
Yes, I know it failed,
Summer.
yes,
That was
Yeah.
something that Lauren Hines had kind of
yes, yep, so I don't know if that's coming back, I don't know how successful that was, it.
I don't really remember. I don't think it was really
Yeah.
successful. if I
We're
remember
kind of disappointed, I
correctly.
think.
coordinated. There wasn't any participation, but.
Yeah.
I never heard about this, but I know that there's a lot of fly fishermen that would probably be very interested.
Yeah,
especially
maybe.
some of the parks lands like Grass Lake and some of the more
Yeah,
less boated
Yeah.
ones. I don't know. I'd be
Hmm.
interested in continuing that conversation.
yeah.
There is a group every year that has like a open dive thing, like a big annual.
Yeah.
Fishing deal,
Yeah.
shirts and all that
Mhm.
jazz. And it's a bill.
That positive carrot to,
Yeah.
biggest carp of the year gets, get some award.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
have that cool glassmaker guy make a nice. For the big carp.
yeah, the
award.
award guy, yeah.
What I've noticed that there's been just a influx of people coming to events and doing things because there's, I would say, a perceived less risk around in terms of all the. And so it might be worthwhile talking about again. And I
Mhm.
thought it happened in the summer. Thank you for bringing that up. It
Yeah.
might be nice to talk about again.
Yep, yep, we'll bring that up to Lauren, she's out until the end of May, but
Oh, Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one was geared more towards like kids and getting them in, but maybe it's.
I
more
like the
of a
fly fish idea.
sport.
Sport fishermen, I think
Yes.
you could really,
Or like teach
Mhm.
people how to fly fish.
that would be cool.
Yeah.
Fish fisher, so I don't know.
Learn on some sunfish and actually catch something.
Yeah.
Make it correct away.
Yeah.
Just a very finicky fish, hard.
Oh, interesting.
My buddy's got a dough bait recipe that works really well.
Yeah.
We used to fish from Mississippi back when I was high school.
See,
Some of those recipes are secrets, so.
Hot dogs.
it sounds like there, if we get the right audience, it might be nice to try. Any other questions for the admin status reports? I can talk to Tina about the closed actions and some of the scheduling stuff over the summer. Okay, next up, I believe it's project status. Okay, so just to make sure before I forget, so we'll add the chloride discussion and then I apologize, I should have taken a note myself. I can go back and review, but there was one other thing that we want. No, we got it. It was governance.
Yeah.
Okay. I only had a few questions on this. There was this is on B, the Common Creek flood risk reduction feasibility study. There was a really interesting note that said the bar team coordinated with the city of North Paul on an upcoming flood risk open house. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I attended that with a couple of our staff. So the city is, kind of leading their own flood risk reduction study event, right? Yeah, so they're looking at certain areas. So they received a grant to look at certain sort of vulnerable populations. So they have like 3 or 4 spots of the city that they're primarily looking at. And so we were able to share some data with them to help them develop that. And they held this open house last week. There were, with those, you never know who's going to show up, but they had about 20 people.
Oh, good.
Yeah, in attendance, which was great. None of them lived in those priority areas. So it was a lot of comments about what's going on in their homes, and so the city will use those comments they'll include them in the report, and then, they'll help us to like, where do we look in the future? So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I was curious if you got any interesting feedback. There seems to be every week a new article about flooding concerns and whatnot.
Yeah, I would say most of these, and you can watch it on North St. Paul Cable TV or on their YouTube channel. A lot of people had a lot of problems with local drainage issues where, so nothing probably that we would be able to help with. We did schedule a few stewardship grant site visits so we can go out and see if there's something we can do to help that way, but some of them seem more on the city level, like getting out there and looking at the culverts and drainage things.
I'll pause if anybody else has questions. I have a few. On the street sweeping study, which I know I'm excited to see that come back.
Yes.
Have you reached out to some of those cities already?
Yes, so you should see this next month. It's June, yes, so our hope is in June, we'll come back with recommendations for which cities to approve grant funds for fall of 2023. So we had 7 or 8 individual city meetings, got a little bit more data from each city to talk about their specific street sweeping programs and what they would need. And then based on that, we know which cities we would benefit the most from water quality wise to have enhanced sweeping. So we reached out to them and asked for informal, basically numbers, if they were to hire a contractor, what would that look like? So they're pulling those together and we'll have those to show you next month.
Okay, that's really good. On the wetland workshop education and planning, last meeting, it was a great presentation, but went really long and really deep. So maybe we should, and future ones, revisit the workshop idea. Maybe plan it with the tour and make an afternoon of it. I know that we have hard time scheduling, so it might be nice to start figuring out when to do that.
I know Tina mentioned a couple ideas for a tour possibly at the June meeting.
Mhm.
Kind of depends what construction is happening and where things are at, so.
June's gonna be a heavy meeting.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh, we had talked on the, this is K, project operations, automatic lake level stations. We were gonna do something with the noise on those lake level measures. Did we execute to that? There's some questions about the wild swings, and some of the, on the automated lake monitoring levels and that were
Yeah,
causing some questions. Is that something that we looked at?
yes.
I think they've all been grayed out until
Okay,
the
that's
currently, I think within the last little bit, the stations went live a little bit before we had gone out and
Water out.
taken elevations and kind of zeroed everything. And I think most of the stations are working right now. There's a couple that are still having a hard time with. I think we're waiting for some equipment to get in, but I think most are reading correctly currently.
Yeah, that's just to keep an eye on as we keep doing that.
Yeah, I think in the future, I know in the future we'll not have the stations go online until we get there and double check that they are reading correctly. And just have it all grayed out to be sure.
Good, that's good. I know that was a source of questions from folks.
Since I have a presence on the website, do we have the ability to kind of cue in on the level of interest, number of visits to that location? If we
Yeah.
don't. it
I
would be
think
good for-
Lauren can, communications, Lauren can tell like which page has
I think
been
it's
looked at the
page,
most,
But I don't
yes.
know if you could tell if they're specifically looking at elevation.
Yes, right.
Yeah, beyond
It'd just be Tanner's Lake.
There's software solutions to do that, but I think they're
Yeah.
Yeah,
Another possibility is you can put a voluntary survey, you know, if they're there, like, hey, what are you here looking for? Something like that, you know, just a quick.
I had somebody on Wabasso coming about the lake monitoring just today. I know they're visited. I don't know if we can single it out.
yeah. Can look into more of the, what, statistics she can pull out. Mhm.
I look at them all the time.
The last one is, I wanted to just highlight T, and it's unfortunate that Phil retired.
Yeah,
He just added so much value to the staff and his commentary is awesome. He's gonna be really missed. Did you guys, I apologize, I've been really away from email recently. Did you celebrate and?
yeah, so we will be, so you didn't miss it, so we're gonna have, hopefully you got this, but May 10th, there's a happy hour. I think it's 4 to 6 at Prize Brewery in Minneapolis, yes. Yeah, Bill is not one to be the center of attention, so we had to maybe force this on him.
I saw, I think that same email proposed different gift ideas, is where I'll leave it.
Yes, so I know Carrie was collecting some dollars, so if you're interested in contributing,
Talk to Carrie.
or talk to Carrie, yeah. I think we decided, well, I don't, yeah, Bill's not
Did
on
you
here,
say
but
this Saturday?
Wednesday, the 10th.
Oh, the 10th.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
it'd be, I just.
yeah,
I
I know
hadn't
she's
seen
still
it
working on
really.
it, yes.
I just realized I'm not getting, I haven't been getting watershed district emails.
Oh.
Yeah,
Well, no, it's because I forward them to my, I don't know how to use the Outlook. So I forward it to my U of M account and it's not.
Seems like.
Oh.
Those are talking about that.
So- Think it's on our end or?
I need to, I'll talk.
Okay,
Yeah, we should
But
talk
you
to
guys
Pam
are
about it,
all-
because if you guys, because there's a Minnesota watersheds tour coming up that would be interested to see.
yeah, and that email has not gone out yet.
No, I got it.
Oh, you got it.
I got the email.
I have.
From up? Okay.
Water.
Okay.
Or-
You said that,
Yeah, they came from Jan Boyd, I
Dan,
think.
yeah.
yes, okay, you saw that, yeah,
I've been getting those,
but not,
but I thought that
They're,
in my kind of onboarding that Tina had said you can expect to see a notice to our watershed email that the board packet is available.
Yes.
And I've not gotten any of those.
Yeah.
Last month.
I wonder if maybe,
you
have you been
kind of-
getting them?
I get those for sure.
So maybe your
I have not
address
gotten-
hasn't been added to that list?
Yeah,
You
I
got it?
just- I mean, I've just been going to the
Yeah,
website
as to
and
the
downloading
memo,
that stuff in.
I haven't seen.
Okay. Okay,
So that we can
Yeah.
follow, that would be a good thing.
yes, you should be on the list.
Oh, shoot, I forgot to bring this up. You brought it up earlier and I just wanted to reinforce it on the CAC update. Carrie gave a really great update. Ben is the new staff sponsor. Looking forward at the adopt the drain and the other options probably should be on our afternoon, and I forgot to mention that.
Yes, and I think adopted is, isn't it?
Adopted, yeah, definitely. Adopted brain is, but
Yeah.
there seem to be some other ideas that you were saying, and maybe having Stephanie come and talk through it would be nice.
I was specifically thinking that there seems to be interest on a number of things that CAC has kind of expressed. And I'm not sure that that's really been adequately communicated to the board, if the board has given any kind of feedback. It seems like there's an opportunity for a little bit better coordination. And one of the ideas that I mentioned earlier is there any room for or need for monitoring? And I mentioned possibly the chloride or in our streams. I know the state PCA does the transparency tubes in streams as well as in lakes. And do we have any data coming in from citizens for either streams or lakes? Is that something that we might also kind of promote within, because it's kind of trying to reach out to that broader community.
It's
And
an engagement.
I've had any number of conversations with people that I know, and they know nothing about watershed.
And are you guys on the CAC communications list, or is that just me? I thought there was an email that came through from someone on there talking about doing some of this sampling that you're mentioning through citizen science.
I think I did see an email.
Yeah, it was looking for volunteers to go to like Lake Phelan and some others to,
I don't remember.
they had a specialized area that they were looking for some volunteers to.
I mean, as we look forward to planning next year, having maybe Carrie sometimes used to come and give us a talk about the CAC feedback. It seems like it'd be beneficial to hear some of like they had a prioritized list of ideas, right, on the thing, just to hear more about them as we plan for next year. I'd like to see that come forward to the board later. I don't know if that merits to the action log, but it definitely would fall into major comments and future meetings.
Yes, I do see Stephanie unmuted. Stephanie, do you want to say anything?
Certainly. So thank you. I'm never quite sure. I just wanted to be quiet. So thanks for calling on me. Yes, the CAC, as Mark said, I think we would like some more direction in terms of being able to support what the board is priorities and interests. And so building on the adopt a drain, we are presenting that as a highlight at the upcoming Waterfest. And there are, I think, lots of opportunities. I just for further engaging the CAC or the larger community. I was just on the phone with Gail Zembel from 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, and I won't go into the details now, but they do leverage their CAC both for sampling and as well as outreach, like at farmers markets, just to share more, increase the presence and awareness. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you for the opportunity, and hope there's additional opportunities in the future.
I've got to listen to the CAC. I definitely consistently been impressed with some of the ideas. It's just making sure that they're prioritized and they come and get some airtime. So I don't have any further questions on actions. The last section is manager comments in next month's meeting. I was going to ask for us to do a quick little exercise, if you wouldn't mind. Could you share your screen at all and go to the board actions, if you don't mind? Is that possible?
I don't know, so I don't have it on this.
That's
Eric
okay.
might-
So
Oh, yeah, maybe Eric.
So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 pretty heavy topics targeted for June. And I'm trying to look to y'all for input on which 2 would be prioritized for June.
Okay.
There are the West Badness lake boundary change, which I think, you know, there's the governance manual, there's the adopted terrain program evaluation promotion. And then there's the equity area definition.
So I will say the equity thing won't, like, that might just be a little blurb. I don't know that it needs to be a big presentation, so if that helps.
Yeah, that does. I was thinking presentation, discussion, approval. I was like, ooh, that one's.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but I think it'll be more just information for you, so it should be pretty quick.
We thought the school.
I'm sure, I'm sure these have come before the board prior, but for me, most of these are new. If there's any way I could get like an advanced summary even would help. You know, it's because we don't put the board back until.
And I can talk to Tina a little bit about that, if there's some way to send
Just a past conversation, if there's, you know, something to help catch me up a little bit, so I'm more ready for, I think that would help.
Okay.
To me anyways.
I would second that
Okay, not the only one.
as a new board member. I
Yeah.
don't, some of these I know a little bit about, but
Mhm.
some I know next.
Yeah,
Okay, so I'll talk to Tina, because that's one of the things that she and I work through is the agenda topics. And so if it helps down select in a meaningful way, I'll see if she's capable of helping provide like 2 sentences for each of these, or if it's between her and I, we can recall what those are. I just don't want to,
even if we could be directed to the previous time it was before the board, and we could go back to the board packet at
We could
that
do that.
time, you know, that would probably be great.
Yeah, 'cause, yeah, like some of these probably, well, yeah, like the West Bannis probably will have a lot, land acquisition might have some past discussion, but like the review of equity areas will be fairly new to everybody.
the equity and the governance will be relatively new even to me. I know I've requested to see it before the meeting, but haven't had a chance to look at that yet. But the vadness and land acquisition, that's gonna be quite a discussion. So maybe that's a good way mentally, at least as a draft, is we'll split it as, we'll either do West Vadness or lake land acquisition, and then one of the other 2.
Yeah, but she actually has land acquisition and use policy for July.
Which
He did, yes.
will happen also in June.
End of June, yes, but different meetings, so, yeah.
And then alum use will come sometime in that period as well, and that's definitely gonna be a discussion.
Are some of those part of the governance manual or not?
No, I would, the governance will really help clarify what is, so the president has a certain set of responsibilities currently, and they're loosely drafted in the, not loosely drafted, they're descriptively drafted in the water management work. But we just wanted some additional clarity on what that means. What does it mean to be a treasurer? Are you responsible for going through and looking at X, Y, and Z?
So it's more officer roles per se.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. I thought it would be great, especially with the turnover, just to bet on it. But I think it'll be a discussion. So I'll follow up with Tina, but I just wanted to see if you guys had an opinion right off the bat. But if not, that's fine.
Are there like the West Vadness or are any of these kind of critical in terms of timing?
I think West Badness is, in my opinion, because we need to understand as that comes forward, how to plan for it for future years, and budget planning will start looking into it.
Yeah.
So in my mind, that one's probably the top priority.
Okay.
The land acquisition also could potentially impact what we do with budgeting. So that's yet another one. I know it's in July, but it's a pretty important one. Just wanted to throw it out there if people had opinions on them, but I just want to make sure that we're prioritizing them appropriately.
Yeah, and I think Adopt a Drain will be more, like a memo or something in the packet, and then if discussion is needed or presentation, we can do that. The other side note to the West Van is that also depending on other agencies, so if that, I don't exactly know where that stands. I think it's pretty set for June, but if there's some delay on the other agency side, that would be a good, or a reason for that to be delayed till the July or August meeting, but I think it's on track for June.
So we are solidly in the manager comments next month's meeting. Did we have any update on the flooding stuff? I know you did, you educated us and the public on how you approach that concern question. Any drive for or new information, knowing all of the articles that are coming out?
Right. We're not seeing levels rising to concerning levels in the district. So, I mean, where you're hearing reports of flooding, I mean, there's, yeah, like larger systems where, you go down into Iowa, all that water, coming off of here and everywhere.
For our district right now, the monitoring has suggested there's no action required.
Right. Yep.
That's it. Well, I think we're at row 14. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I will second that.
Thank you. I don't think we have to vote.
No,
You're good.
everyone's in favor, all right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, well, that's a good sign.
Right.
Good night.
Bye.
Good job.
See ya.
Paige.
Everyone.
Good to have you here, Stephanie.
Oh, okay.